All right, let's talk about a challenge that, anyone who's ever been part of a cloud migration knows really well. What do you do when you just can't move everything at once? Well, we're going to dive into a pretty powerful solution, though, and this is important, a temporary one that's basically like a data bridge to the cloud. It's what makes the seemingly impossible, well, possible. So imagine this. You're all set to move to Azure. It's exciting, right? But then, bam, the big question hits you. What about our IP addresses? You've got these legacy apps, and a lot of them have IP addresses hard-coded right into their DNA. And keeping those exact addresses isn't just a nice to have, it can be absolutely critical, maybe for compliance, or maybe just to avoid a massive, super expensive rewrite just to keep things running. And this right here, this is the core challenge. A big bang migration where everything moves at once, it almost never happens in the real world. You almost always end up in this hybrid state for a while. Some stuff's in Azure, some still on-prem. And that creates this communication gap that can literally stop your whole migration cold. Yeah, this really gets to the heart of it. Picture it. On one side, you've got your on-prem data center with all those legacy apps chugging along. On the other, your shiny new Azure virtual network. And the new apps over in Azure, they have to talk to the old ones back on-prem, like they're right next to each other, like they're on the same network. But just changing the IP addresses of those old apps, that's usually a complete non-starter. So how in the world do you bridge that gap? Well, the answer is you build a bridge, a kind of digital data bridge. And the fancy engineering term for this is subnet extension. It's a technique that was designed for exactly these kinds of tricky hybrid situations.
So what is it exactly? Well, subnet extension is a really clever trick. It basically makes two totally separate physical networks act like they're one single logical network. It lets the apps in Azure and the apps on-prem talk over the same broadcast domain. What that really means is it kind of tricks them into thinking they're on the same local network. And that's the magic, right? Because it means you don't have to rip everything apart and re-architect your whole network from the ground up.
Okay, but hold on. This isn't some magic wand you should wave at every problem. Microsoft is super clear about this. It's only meant for very specific situations. So let's talk about the three big use cases where building this data bridge actually makes a ton of sense. First up, and this is the big one, is a phased migration. You move a couple of apps to Azure, set up this bridge so they can talk back home, and then you can move the rest over time. It's way less risky. Second reason, latency. Maybe you have some apps that just have to stay physically close to your on-prem data for performance. And third, there's compliance. You might just have rules, no ifs, ands, or buts, that say certain apps or data must stay on premises. In those three cases, yeah, a subnet extension can be an absolute lifesaver. Okay, so how does this whole bridge thing actually work? It kind of feels like magic, but really, it's just some very clever networking. The big secret is a process called encapsulation. I love this analogy. It's like putting a letter inside another, bigger envelope so you can send it through a completely different postal system. And this secret ingredient, the magicians performing this trick, they're called network virtual appliances, or NVAs. Just think of them as specialized virtual machines that are experts at networking. You'll need one on each side of your bridge, one sitting in your Azure VNet and one in your on-prem data center. They are basically the gatekeepers for this whole setup. Let's actually follow a piece of data on its trip. Okay, so a packet leaves a VM in Azure, and it's headed for a server back on-prem. The NVA in Azure grabs it and wraps it up inside a new packet. That's the encapsulation, our envelope. This new package then zooms across your secure connection, maybe a VPN or an ExpressRoute link. When it gets to the other side, the on-prem NVA catches it, unboxes it, that's decapsulation, and sends the original untouched packet on its way. To that server on-prem, it looks like the packet just came from the server rack next door. So you might be wondering, how do these NVAs know where everything is? Well, they're constantly talking to each other. They build and share this map of which IP addresses are on which side of the bridge. For really complex setups, they might even use a central mapping service to keep everything updated in real time. It's a pretty smart, dynamic system that makes your data always knows where to go, whether that's in the cloud or back on-prem. Okay, now, before you get all excited and start planning to build these bridges everywhere, we have to hit the pause button. This is a really important word of caution, and it comes straight from the folks at Microsoft who know this stuff inside and out. And here it is. It's super direct. Quote, "You should not extend your subnets unless it is necessary." Let that sink in. This is not, I repeat, not a standard way to do networking. It's not a permanent design choice. It's a specialized tool you pull out of the toolbox for a very specific problem. So the biggest takeaway here is this. You have to think of subnet extension as a temporary fix. It's an intermediate step. It's a bridge you build to get you over a rough patch in your migration journey. The real goal, the final destination, should always be to eventually renumber those old apps, if you can, and make them true cloud-native citizens in Azure. The bridge is just there to help you cross the river, not to build a house on. And that really leaves us with one final big question for you to think about with your own cloud strategy. Are you building temporary bridges just to get through a tricky transition? Or are you accidentally building permanent structures that are going to keep you tied to the past? So ask yourself, is your cloud strategy about building bridges, or is it about building brand new homes?